2,000 on thermometers, 2,000 surrounding us. Travel 2,000 kilometers to hang out with us. What's up, danger? What's up, danger? Hey, getting old, they doubted us, makes it that more marvelous. Sign 'em up cause ominous vibes and I get synonymous. What's up, danger? Hey, don't be a stranger, cause I like high chances that I might lose. I like it all on the edge just like you. Hey, I like tall buildings so I can leap off of them. I go hard with it no matter how dark it is. I'm insane on my toes, I can keep the world balanced on my nose. I had a slumber party with all my foes, now with them like a badger on all my clothes. If I'm crazy, I'm on my own. If I'm waiting, it's on my throne. If I sound lazy, just ignore my tones. I'm always gonna answer when you call my phone. Like, what's up, danger? Like, what's up, danger? Don't be a stranger. What's up, danger? Travel 200 miles, I'm knocking at your door, and I don't really care if you ain't done wrong. Come on, what's up, danger? Hey, don't be a stranger. I like it when trouble brews, I want that change. I like it when there's turbulence on my airplanes. I like it when I sense things that I can't see yet. Swimming with sharks when they ain't feed yet, cause I like high chances that I might lose. I like it on the edge just like you. Hey, I like tall buildings so I can leap off of them. I go hard with it no matter how dark it is. If I'm crazy, on my own. If I'm waiting, it's on my throne. If I sound lazy, just ignore my tone, cause I'm always gonna answer when you call my phone. Like, what's up, danger? What's up, danger? Can't stop me now. Hey, I said I got you now. Come on, what's up, danger? Come on, I said, what's up, danger? Good morning, Flatirons, great to see you. Let's stand up. We welcome those of you watching online as well. Let's sing out this morning. I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my turn till I met you. Come on, sing it out. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul, and now your freedom is all that I know. The old made new, Jesus, when I met you. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. blessing was heavy. The chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, but you called me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you called my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day.
How great the chasm that lay between us. How high the mountains I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven, spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. The cross has spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe, and out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe, and out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim.
so good to be in this room together and declare that truth together. We are so glad that you're here. Take a second, say hi to the people that are around you, and then you can go ahead and take your seats.
Well, what's up, Flatirons? We are so glad that you guys are here. My name's Jesse. I work with our campus pastors and the campuses. Really glad to be here. Just want to welcome everybody from all of our campuses, also from our God Behind Bars campus in Lyman in the prison there. I mean, just incredible. Welcoming those guys. And then if you're online, we're just so glad that you're here. I don't know about you guys, I've loved this series. I really have loved the anti-hero series. I love just about anything with superheroes. I would have been wearing like a Marvel t-shirt up here, but I was like, that might be distracting. I don't know. And like when we talk about anti-heroes and heroes, all the other guys who have talked this series have used all the good examples. And so I'm like stuck with the only place that we can turn to look at heroes, and that's Disney, okay? So let's dive into Disney. How many of you guys have been to Disneyland, Disney World before? Just raise your hands, okay? We've got some people that love Disney World. So we took our family a year ago, and I'll just say it was a new experience for me, okay? What I didn't know is how hard it was gonna be to stick to your parenting principles when you're at Disney World with your kids, okay? Because if you haven't been there, you're waking up at 6 a.m. in the morning, you get to the park early, but it's hot, there are crowds everywhere, you gotta wait in lines for hours, there's like junk food all over the place. I mean, it really brought my parenting back to the basics. And by that, I mean bribes and empty threats, okay? That's about all I had. I mean, it really came down. I was trying to be a good dad, but we threatened to leave the park like 10 times a day if the kids wouldn't start behaving. It was just wild, but we took some pictures to just commemorate our time at the most magical place on earth. So this is the magical time right before we took my daughter, Kate, to the park for the first time. This is the magical time we told Ford he couldn't have his 5th churro. And then this is the magical time I took Gray on his first roller coaster ever. So, Disney, the most magical place on earth. You know, if the magic trick is making my kids melt down 20 times a day, oh man. But Disney World is this world that's full of heroes. You got like Moana, the Lion King, you got Aladdin, Snow White, all these heroes. But there are no anti-heroes at Disney. But the interesting thing about taking my kids to Disney World is it turns me into the anti-hero. And this past year when we took our kids, our oldest two, Claire and Gray, are 10 and 8 respectively, and they started to get into riding some of the roller coasters. And so the first day we take them on some of the classics, and they were crying a little bit, but we were still having a good time. And then the second day we went to Hollywood Studios, and we may have pushed it a little too far, okay? The name of the ride should have given it away, but we took them on the ride called the Tower of Terror. So my kids told us that they could handle it, but the premise of the ride, if you've never been there before, is you basically get in an elevator that breaks down, and they kind of strap you in, and they raise you up like, 500 feet. They take you out to the ledge, and then the elevator breaks. And my kids said that they were up for it, so we're riding the ride, and literally, right as we get out to the ledge and it starts to drop, my son Gray, who's standing next to me, he grabs my hand, and he goes, "Dad, make it stop!" And I remember looking at him like, "Buddy, it's a little too late for that." There's not much I can do for you right now. But I just told him, I was like, it'll be over soon. That's all that I could tell him. It'll be over soon. And if you've been to Disney World before, you know that that's actually a lie, that the ride doesn't just end right there, but literally, like the Tower of Terror drops once and then it just bounces you back up a couple times. On the second time that we're coming down, Gray looks over and he goes, "Dad, why are you doing this to me?" And like when it's all said and done, we get to the bottom. All my kids are crying. All the kids on the ride are crying. We have to leave the ride. We got to leave the park. We go back to the hotel. We're heading up to our room, and we get on the elevator. Except for Gray, and Gray's standing back there, and he's just like, "I think we better take the stairs." You know, he's scarred for life. He still won't ride elevators. I mean, I don't blame him. But anyways, that story, that's why I love this series that we're in. Because for me, I'll tell you, most of the time, especially when it comes to parenting, I'm no hero when it comes to parenting. I'm no hero when it comes to most of the other parts of my life as well. And that's a silly story about a dad fail at Disney World. But the truth is, I could tell you guys this morning other stories about dad fails, and they're not funny, they're painful. And they're embarrassing, and they're those wish I could forget dad fail stories. I just didn't want to start out our Sunday with that, okay? And so that's why I'm not sharing those, but I could share those stories. And that's why I've needed this series. Because for me, I've needed to hear that God doesn't need us to be perfect in order to work through us. We've been saying this all series right here. In our weakest moments, God does his strongest work. When we're weak, he's strong. That's the foundation of this whole series. And each week we've looked at a different person in the Bible, and we've seen how they're not a hero, but they're anti-heroes. They're regular people just like you and just like me. And today we're wrapping up that series. And we're going to look at a famous person from the Old Testament in the Bible, King David. He's one of the kings of ancient Israel. And we're going to look at this moment in David's life where he's looking himself in the mirror and he's asking himself the question, how did I end up here? How did I end up here? The moment where he realizes he's slowly turned into the person he never thought that he would be. He doesn't even recognize himself anymore. And if we're going to be honest, that's something that many of us have been through too. You never thought that you'd be addicted. You never thought that you'd do that at work and you'd lose your job for that. You never thought that you'd be the mom that snaps at her kids all the time. And in those quiet moments, we look in the mirror and we ask ourselves the same question. How did I get here? How did I end up here? And before we look at this moment where David's asking himself this question, I want to give you a quick summary of who David is in case you're here for the first time or maybe just as a refresher. So David was this shepherd boy. He was the youngest in his family, and God chooses him to be the king of Israel. And one of the notable things about the Bible is the Bible refers to David as a man after God's own heart. David, in his spare time, he'd go out to the fields and he'd write these songs and these prayers to God. We find those in the book of Psalms. He was a warrior who established peace. He was a king who ruled his people fairly. He was seen as like the perfect king of the nation of Israel. But in this story we're going to look at today in 2 Samuel chapter 11, he's about as imperfect as they come. He's probably just as famous for this story as he is for fighting the giant Goliath. I mean, even my daughter knows about this. The other night I was tucking my daughter, Claire, she's 10 years old. I was tucking her into bed, and she just says out of the blue, she goes, "Dad, who's your favorite Bible person?" And I remember going, and I couldn't think of one, okay? So I'm a pastor who can't think of his favorite person from the Bible, and I just go, I like all of them. And she bought it, I think, okay? She thinks I'm like more spiritual now because I like all the characters of the Bible equally. And then she goes, "Dad, my favorite is David because he was a man after God's own heart. Except for that one time. He made a mistake, and it was a big mistake." And I just started thinking like, what are they teaching our kids over here in kids ministry? I mean, I have no idea what's happening. So I want to tell you the story of that mistake. And it starts out with David sending his men out to war, and he stays behind at the palace. And this is a new thing for David because typically David goes out to war with his men because he counts his men's lives as valuable as his own. But this time he sends his men out to fight his war, and he stays behind. David's checked out. He's bored. And you've heard this before, a bored man is a dangerous man. So 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 2. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. Now, here's just some free advice for all the men in the room, okay? If you're in your backyard and you see a woman taking a shower in her backyard, what you should immediately do is go to your shower and take a cold shower alone, okay? That's what you should do. Here's what you should not say. You should not say, "I wonder who that is over there, and I wonder why they're taking a shower in their backyard. I should find out more about this person who's taking a shower in their backyard." Don't do that. Go take a shower on your own. Go to your own house. But look what David does in verse 3. It said, "And David sent someone to find out about her." And at this point, we know something about David. David has no game. Okay? Because David actually, this is the equivalent of him asking one of his friends, "Yo, go get her number for me." Okay? He's like, gets his friend to go get her number. He says, "Hey, go find out who that woman is." And his servant comes back and he says, "Her name is Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah." Now, this right there should stop him. She's not available in the first place. She's a married woman. But here's what's worse. Uriah was one of David's most loyal, most trusted warriors. He was one of his best friends. He was a part of a group of men that were like David's secret service. His house was so close to the palace because it was there so that Uriah could protect David when Uriah's home. And David has a decision to make. She's a married woman who's actually married to one of my most loyal friends. But on the other hand, I'm the king, and I can do what I want. And so verse 4, then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. And then he sends her home. And David takes what's not his to take. He thinks that a one-night stand is all that it is. Until Bathsheba, she gets a message to the king. She says, I'm pregnant. And I know the baby's not Uriah's because he's off fighting your war. And now Bathsheba has what in 9 months will be living, breathing proof of David's sin. So David, he schemes this plan to cover it up. He calls Uriah back from battle. He meets with him and he's asking him how the war is going. And then when they're done meeting, he says, Uriah, why don't you just stay a day or two, okay? And while you're already here, I don't know, your wife, what's her name again? Your wife, you should go, I bet she's lonely. You should go spend time with her. I don't know, put on a Marvin Gaye album, Netflix and chill, whatever you guys want to do, make a baby. I mean, who knows? This could be great because you're already home. And Uriah responds and he says this, how could I go home to my wife when all my soldiers can't go home to theirs? Notice how this is the exact opposite of the behavior that David showed just a few verses earlier. Verse 12, then David said to him, stay here one more day, and tomorrow I'll send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. And at David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat amongst his master's servants. He did not go home. See, Uriah has more integrity and loyalty when he's drunk than David has when he's sober. And David's cover-up attempts aren't working. And if Uriah won't go along with the plan, then he's got to get Uriah out of the picture. In verse 14 says, in the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab. Joab's the commander who's out in the field, and he sent it with Uriah. And in it, he wrote, put Uriah on the front line where the fighting is fiercest. Then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die. And so Uriah carries his own death sentence to the commander. And when the fighting starts, Uriah's on the front lines fighting for his king, and at his king's orders, all the other troops pull back, and Uriah is killed on his own. David's commander, he sends this message to David. He's asking why he gave instructions to let one of his best, most fiercest, most loyal warriors be killed in battle. It just doesn't add up to the commander. And so David told the messenger, hey, say this to Joab. Don't let this upset you, okay? The sword, it devours one as well as the other. Press the attack against the city and destroy it. Say this to encourage Joab. David basically looks back at Joab and says, look, it's not that big of a deal, okay? It's war. People die all the time. I mean, Uriah is just a casualty of war. It happens all the time. Don't worry about it. David doesn't tell him the truth, that it's a cover-up. He just makes excuses. And David is now a heartless murderer. How did we get here? How does the man who was the man after God's own heart, he was a fair and he was a good king, he'd sit in the fields and he'd write these songs and these prayers about how good God was. He would fight alongside of his men in battle. How does that man get to the place where he brings a close friend's wife into his bed, pulls that same man back from battle where other men are counting on him, gets him drunk, and ultimately murders an innocent man, and he doesn't feel the least bit bad about it? How did we get here? And if we look far enough back, we'll realize this isn't just a lust issue. It's not just a jealousy issue. It's not just a lying issue. They're all symptoms of a deeper issue. The deeper issue is the same for you and I. If we look back at some of the worst choices we've ever made, at the root of it, there's just one thing: entitlement. Entitlement says, I deserve this for my sake. That's how David got here. I'm the king. I deal with all the pressures of being the king. I've worked hard to get us to where we're at. I deserve this. And then out of a sense of entitlement, he starts to make excuses. That's the next thing about entitlement. Entitlement leads to excuses. But we can't blame him because we do this too. The sex, it's non-existent in my house. Doesn't she know how hard I work? I work so hard to provide for our family. I deal with all the pressure of work, and I deserve some gratitude. And that's where it starts. Then a coworker starts to pay attention to you, and it feels like a breath of fresh air. Finally, you feel what it feels like for somebody to think that you're as important as you think that you are, for somebody to see how hard that you work and acknowledge you for that. And months later, you can look past a broken family, you can look past a broken marriage, you can look past the affair, and you'll see the roots of entitlement all the way through it. And it doesn't have to blow up our lives in dramatic ways either. When we allow entitlement into our lives, we end up thinking things, doing things, and saying things that we never thought that we'd say. I'm just so tired. I deserve a break. Why won't these kids just shut up and leave me alone for a second? I'm following Jesus. I'm doing all the right things, but why does all this bad stuff keep happening to me? I don't deserve this. Or maybe it's as simple as this. I really want some new shoes. I want new shoes. I know I can't afford them, but I've been working so hard. I'm so tired. I just want a treat. I just deserve a treat. I just deserve something. And just play these examples out. What starts with entitlement ends with broken relationships with kids, broken trust with God, and just being flat out broke. Because when we live out of a place of entitlement, even when things are blowing up around us because of our own choices, we'll make excuses and we'll blame someone else. For a while, this will work for us, but it will always catch up with us. That's exactly what happened in David's story. Here's what happens next. Verse 26, when Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. And at this point, David thinks that the cover-ups work. Nobody else knows the truth. His secret is safe. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. The next chapter, it said, the Lord sent Nathan to David. And so Nathan is a prophet. And if you were here last week or you watched online, he's a prophet just like Jonah was a prophet. And the prophets are God's mouthpieces to his people. And the prophets come around on the scene whenever things are headed in the wrong direction. And so that's what's happening here with Nathan. And David is about ready to get caught. Verse 1 continues, when Nathan came to David, he said to him, there were two men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb he had bought. He raised it, and it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, it drank from his cup, it even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. And let's just pause. That's a little weird, okay? Like, we can say that. But some people don't have boundaries with their pets, okay? You've seen this before. Interesting fact about this story is that phrase, certain town that the man was from, it literally translates Boulder County. And that's a joke, okay? If you don't think that's funny, you need to lighten up, okay? Like, go cuddle with your cats or something, okay? Man, it's a joke. Verse 4, it continues. Now a traveler came to the rich man. But the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. And now we know that Nathan is setting David up. But David, he actually has no clue. He's completely blind to it. Verse 5, David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, as surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity. And then verse 7, then Nathan said to David, you are the man. And David realizes this isn't a story about sheep, it's about people. And that the person he's mad at isn't just another rich man, it's himself. and David's caught. Somebody knows what he's done. Will he finally admit his mistake, admit that he messed up and accept the consequences? Or is he going to keep on trying to manipulate the situation? Because again, he's king. He could have this prophet removed and put somewhere else. He could have this prophet killed and nobody else would know his secret. Is he going to take responsibility or is he going to keep on making excuses? Verse 13, and then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Nathan says, you are the man. And finally, David admits, I'm the man. I did it. And David repents. He admits that he's done things he never thought that he would do, and he asks for forgiveness. He actually writes about it in Psalm 51, if you want to read that later. But he asks for forgiveness, and God forgives him. But David still has to deal with the consequences. He now has a wife who knows that her new husband killed her old husband. He now has a commander who can't trust his king anymore. And David still has a guilty conscience because he knows that he's got blood on his hands. And there's so much more that goes with that story. But when we look at how he got here, it starts and it ends with entitlement. See, David forgot this. David forgot that he wasn't entitled to the throne. He was entrusted with the throne. He was entrusted with the throne. He started believing that all these people around him existed to serve his wishes and do what he wanted. He started thinking that because he was the king, the rules didn't apply to him. But David didn't have a claim to the throne before God chose him. He didn't have a royal birthright. He didn't have a claim to the throne on his own, but God chose him not because of who he was or what he had done. God chose him because God knew that David would be a good, a fair, and a righteous king. David wasn't entitled to the throne. He was entrusted with it. And everything that we have in our lives, we're not entitled to what God's given us. We've been entrusted with it. He didn't give it to us because we deserve it. It's actually a gift from God just because he loves us. That includes your wife, your husband, your family, your job, your house, your income, your reputation, your talent. We're not entitled to it. We're entrusted with it. You might be saying, no, Jesse, here's the thing. I worked hard and I sacrificed so much to get to where I'm at in my career. My family, we saved and we saved and we saved for our house. I've worked for everything that I have. Before you get mad at me, just hear me out on this. I'm not saying that you didn't work for it. I'm just saying that everybody in this room, everybody here has benefited at one time or another from situations and circumstances that are completely outside of our control. I mean, you've got zero influence on whether you were born in a place of opportunity or not. We have zero influence on whether the stock market goes up or it collapses. I mean, you have zero influence over the fact that your wife was more interested in your personality than your looks, okay? Me too, okay? Thank God. I mean, while we may have worked hard to get to where we're at, we're also the beneficiaries of forces completely outside of our control. And personally, I believe that that's the grace of God. You see, here's the key difference between entitlement and ownership. You see, entitlement says, I deserve this for my sake, and ownership says, I'm a steward of this for their sake. They're two very completely different ways of looking at it and looking at the things that we have. So what do we learn from this? How do we avoid ending up like David? I mean, imagine what David's life would have looked like if he would have had a Nathan in his life the entire time. Because here's the thing about entitlement. We are incapable of seeing entitlement in our own lives. We actually have to rely on the people around us to point it out. And here is the key to resisting entitlement and living in a place of ownership. Surround yourself with people who say, you are the man. Now you're thinking, Jesse, that's great. I need more encouragement in my life, okay? It would be great if I had people around me just saying, you're the man, you're the man, you're the man. And you probably realize that's not where this is heading. I mean, think back to David. David tells somebody to find out who the bathing woman is, to go get her for him. The guy looks back at him and goes, you're the man, all right, I'll make it happen for you. He tells somebody to pour Uriah more wine, even though Uriah's already had too much. I guess we're partying. David, you're the man. I'll do it. He tells somebody to send Uriah to be murdered. You're the king. You're the man. And it takes a Nathan to step up and look David in the eyes and say, you are the man. You've become a person you don't even recognize anymore. You see, entitlement grows deeper and deeper the more that you have people tell you you're the man, and the less you have people who are willing to say, you are the man. So seek out the people willing to say, you are the man, who will tell you when you're wrong, who will call you on your excuses, and who will tell you the truth even when it's dangerous. One of my favorite scriptures that speaks to that, it's in Proverbs 27:6. It says, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. See, real friends may say something that hurts, but you can trust that they do it because they care. But be careful if you only have people around you and all they do is kiss your ego, okay? Be careful. Find the people who love you enough to risk offending you for your own good. They'll tell you the truth, even though it might hurt the relationship, who will risk what you think of them to help you see your blind spots. Find the people who will call you out when you're being entitled and who will call you on your excuses. Because here's the thing, I need somebody to do this in my life. Personally, I need somebody to do this. I need somebody who will love me enough to call me out when I'm off course. Because on my own, I don't naturally step into a place of ownership. I slide into entitlement. Okay, I start thinking that I deserve everything that I want. I start thinking that anything that I don't get, I make excuses for why I can't have it. On my own, I don't step into ownership. I slide into entitlement. And so how do we start putting this into practice? I just want to give you 3 questions to know if we're doing this. And at the same time, these 3 questions, if we're not, they're 3 steps to take to start putting this into practice, and they build on each other. And it's going to seem simple, but at the same time, it's not easy. So here's question number 1. Do you have someone in your life who loves you enough to offend you for your own good? Do you have somebody in your life who loves you enough to offend you for your own good? Let me give you an example of this. When I was in high school, I was a student leader in youth group. There are so many cooler things to do than be a student leader in youth group, but I grew up in Jim's youth group, and Jim and I were close, and Jim was checking up on me one day, and I was spending some time with him, and we were meeting together, and Jim was asking how life was going, and I was telling him about, I'm waking up and I'm reading my Bible all the time, and I'm mentoring these younger students, and my relationship with my girlfriend's going great, and school's going good, and everything's going good, and I'm just telling him about all this stuff, and Jim goes, how's it going with your mom? And like any high school boy, my relationship with my mom at the time was pretty rocky. What Jim didn't know is that earlier that month, I had written a free-form high school essay where I compared my mom to an infamous fascist dictator. Yeah. You're like, how did they let him be a pastor? We have very low standards here at Flatirons, okay? And I wish I could forget about that story, but my mom still has a copy of the essay. It's kind of a weird keepsake, I'll be honest with you. But my mom and my dad, they weren't getting through to me about my attitude. My friends weren't willing to call me out on it. Jim took that role in my life. Jim was willing to ask me the hard questions. He was willing to tell me the hard truth. And I'm so grateful for it. So my question to you, do you have someone in your life who's willing to risk offending you to tell you the truth? If you don't have that person in your life who will tell you the truth, then don't pay any attention to the rest of these questions, okay? That's step 1. So think through your friendships. Does one of those people have the potential to be your Nathan? I want you to set up a time to connect with them and have a conversation this week. Or maybe you're like, Jesse, I can't think of anybody. I literally cannot think of one of my friends who would be able to do that for me. The good news is, like a month from today, we're doing a group launch where we're gonna launch groups where you can actually find a community of people who will come around you, and they'll be willing to ask you the hard questions. And they'll be willing to tell you the hard truth. So that's question 1. Question 2 is this: have you let that person into your mess? So Ben talked about this a couple weeks ago. Do you have a person in your life who knows the real you, mess and all, or do all your friends just know your mask? He said it so well, God will bless your mess, but not your mask. And so will other people. So have you actually let them in? Have you let those people into your mess? So step one, get someone in your life who will offend you for your own good. Step two, let that person into your mess so that they can speak into it. And then the final question number 3, do those people know that you're counting on them? You see, they need to know how important it is that they see your mess and that they speak into it. These people in your life, they need you to tell them that you'll never be the person that you want to be. You'll never be the person that God created you to be unless they come alongside you, and they won't settle for your excuses and they won't settle for your entitlement, but they're going to continually call you into the person that God created you to be. So I'm telling you, on those 3 questions, think about where you are. Which question do you need to answer? Which step do you need to take? Find people in your life and tell them that you're counting on them to ruthlessly identify and root out entitlement in your life. Send those texts, make those calls, set reminders for yourself today. Because David didn't have those people in his life until it was too late. He didn't have that person in his life till it was too late. But here's the most encouraging thing that we can take from today. Here's the thing maybe that you need to take from today more than anything else, okay? David's mistakes still didn't prevent him from being called a man after God's own heart. They didn't look at him and say, David was a man after God's own heart until he made that mistake, and then he wasn't anymore. They literally look over the entire scope of his life, even though he made mistakes, and they still said, he's a man after God's own heart, because David was willing to identify where he was being entitled, admit where he was wrong, repent from it, and ask for forgiveness. All of that, though, the forgiveness, that wasn't because of David's faithfulness, it was because of God's faithfulness. My friend Dean went to Italy recently, and when they were there, they were in Florence, and they saw the statue of David that Michelangelo did. It was actually based off of the story of David. And the guy told him that David was carved out of a block of marble that nobody wanted. They considered it, up until that time, too brittle to make anything significant out of it. And that's until Michelangelo took the stone that no one wanted. He worked on it for 3 years, and out of it, he creates this masterpiece. And that's a good metaphor for David's life. Too brittle, imperfect, slightly damaged, but with a master sculptor, it could be something beautiful. And I think that applies to us too. You see, on our own, we're brittle blocks of stone. We're not really worth very much on our own. But when we get in the hands of a master sculptor, when we allow him to do the time-consuming, the arduous, the painful chiseling process, we can become the people that he saw in us all along. See, God never expects for us to be perfect on our own, and he chooses to work with us anyway. We can be anti-heroes because God doesn't need any other heroes. He already sent one. And that's Jesus. That doesn't mean that we're not trying. What that means is that our effort doesn't earn his affection. We already have it, just like we are. We are the messy, the broken, the imperfect people that God will love and will use in this world. And to remember that, in just a couple moments, we're going to take communion. Because Jesus knew this thing about us. He knew that there were going to be times where we forget about the sacrifice that he made for us, or that we start thinking that we've actually got to strive and earn and do more and more so that we can earn his love. And he says, no, here's what I want you to do. When you get together like this, I want you to just take a simple piece of bread and a simple cup of juice. And I want you to take these things just as a reminder that your relationship with God, it's not because of anything that you've done, but it's what I've done on your behalf. Because my body was broken for you. My blood was poured out for you. So take the bread and take the juice and remember the sacrifice Jesus made on the cross. So we're gonna do that in just a moment. And we're gonna do it a little differently today. Rather than when you get it, just taking it once you receive it, I'm just gonna ask that you hold on to the bread and you hold on to the juice, because the band is gonna play a song as we reflect on it, and we reflect on Jesus' sacrifice. And the song has this line, God bless this mess, if this is as good as it's gonna get. God, if I'm trying my best to fix myself, if I'm trying to clean myself up for you, but this is as good as it's gonna get, God, will you still take me? And communion is a sign for us to remember it's not about how clean we can get ourselves, how much we can fix ourselves. It's all about Jesus. And so as the ushers pass you communion, just hold the bread, hold the juice in your hands until the end of the song. Then we'll come back up and we'll all take communion together. Let's pray. God, I need the reminder that it's not about me, it's not about what I've done, because God, so often I creep into a place of entitlement and I start thinking that I deserve everything that I want. God, thank you for sending your son Jesus for us, somebody that we don't deserve. We didn't deserve him to die on our behalf, but he did it so that we don't have to measure up. God, he measured up for us. So God, as we take this time, I just ask that you would help us to remember the sacrifice of your son Jesus on a cross on our behalf. God, thank you for your love. Thank you for the cross. Thank you for Jesus. It's in his name that we pray. Amen.
Here's to the brokens, misfits and wannabes, the part of you that's just like me, the wallflowers and the holier than thous, to the diamonds that are never gonna leave the rough, the rolling stones that are always stuck, the all-nighters and the lost I've never found. Is as good as it's gonna get. I'm gonna hold you like I know it's gonna be okay. Again, I got a hurricane in my heart, keeps on rattling the good apart. And obviously I'm just an honest wreck, but I'm trying my best. Oh, God bless this mess. God bless this mess. Here's to the waiting, all the waiting that we have to do, the dreams we make that never come true, and all the hurting that comes without a warning. Here's to the view from the tile of the bathroom floor. Ain't we all been there before? And the hell-bent sun that's gonna come up the next morning. God bless this mess, if this is as good as it's gonna get. I'm gonna hold you like I know it's gonna be okay. Again, and I got a hurricane in my heart, keeps on rattling the good apart. And honestly, I'm just an honest wreck, but I'm trying my best. Oh, God bless this mess. Oh, God bless this mess. Most of the time, I forget to pray. When I close my eyes, I just say, God bless this mess, if this is as good as it's gonna get. God bless this mess, if this is as good as it's gonna get. And I'm gonna hold you like I know it's gonna be okay. Again, and I got a hurricane in my heart, keeps on rattling the good apart. And honestly, I'm just an honest wreck, but I'm trying
Why don't you guys stand up with me? I don't know how you walked in this room here today. I don't know what type of brokenness you have in your past. I don't know what type of pain you carry, the wounds that you have. You might be walking in here saying, I am just a mess. I want you to look around real quick, because in this room, you'll see a group of people who will respond to that and say, me too. We're a mess. And we're not afraid to admit it because we still have a God who loves us anyways. We are the anti-heroes. We are the group of people. We are imperfect, we're broken, we're messy, but we're the people that God will love and will use in this world. And I'm telling you, Flatirons, he's using you. He's using you to change communities in rural Africa. He's using you to change the lives of the most vulnerable people in Afghanistan. He's using you to change schools. He's using you to change prisons. He's using you to change the lives of single moms and their kids. He's using you. We might be a mess, but we're his mess. And because we're his mess, we know that we'll be okay. And so we take communion together. We hold these elements in our hands to remember it's not because of or in spite of anything that we've done, but it's all because of Jesus. And we remember the truth in Scripture. In the book of Romans, it says this. It says that at just the right time, while we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. You see, God himself demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, all of us, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And so, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall trouble or hardship or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. And so I'm convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Jesus Christ our Lord. And to remember that, we remember the one who gave up everything that he was entitled to so that he would die for us, something we completely didn't deserve. And so we take the bread and we eat it to remember his body that was broken for us. And we drink the juice to remember the blood that was poured out for us. And we worship and we celebrate a God who would be willing to do that for people like us. Let's worship together.
I'm singing your praises with all of creation, declaring the works of your hands. My voice it is straining as my heart is longing to join in the song of the Lamb. You make all things new. I'm running towards you, I'm walking beside you. Your presence is always with me. Though darkness surrounds me, your glory is shining. I was blind, but now I can see. Oh, you make all things new. Jesus, the King of my salvation. You are my end and my beginning. Your plans are good, your promises are true. Oh, you make all things new. the sea, took the nails to rescue me. Your voice that called for the sun's first light on the cross gave love's victory shout. The stone was rolled and the curtain torn. The grave was killed and your body gone. The night has passed and the morning dawn. The light of life now has overcome. You make all things new. Jesus the King of my salvation. You are my end and my beginning. Your plans are good, your promises are true. You make all things new. Jesus the King of my salvation. You are my end and my beginning. Your plans are good, your promises are true. You make all things new. Yes, you do. You make all things new. You make all things new.
All right, great morning together. We're so glad you spent your morning with us, everybody. If you need prayer for anything, if you would like to have somebody pray for you, anything that's going on in your life, there's a great team up here at the stage. They'd love to pray with you guys. Have a great week. Enjoy this awesome weather. We'll see you next time, everybody.